"It makes no difference what men think of war," said the judge. "War endures, as well as ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him, the ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. That is the way it was and will be. That way and not some other way." Cormac McCarthy, The Blood Meridian. Cormac McCarthy is one of my favorite authors. I think because we share a commonality. We are both the ultimate realist. We kind of accept life for what it is. We like fact. Maybe that's why I love science so much. But he was absolutely correct when he wrote that that's the way it was and will be. That way and not some other way. Think about it. Every single day, war is fought at a corporate level, at a small business level, even during your daily commute as you fight for which lane is best, an advantage over the other driver. Think about it on your child's soccer field. The one area that we really don't think about it is in our homes with our dogs. But it's there. And not the type of war that I talk about that you read or even see in current news, in which there's bloodshed. It's just simply one individual exerting power and influence over another. In other words, a war for position, a war for a resource. Something that gives me the advantage over you, allowing me to not just survive, but to thrive. And when you talk about dominance in dog ownership, it's a very difficult subject. It's one that falls on too many deaf ears or willful ignorance. Everyone wants to be their dog's best friend. And that's fine, as long as you understand you are not your dog's equal. So that brings me to my first point in answering the third question in this series on dominance. When and how do I use dominance to my advantage and even my dog's advantage? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're not able to control your dog, then your dog will wind up in an animal shelter like the other 100 to 200,000 dogs per year that are then euthanized. So it is to their advantage as well. And I think, that'll help you understand at a minimum. I'm hoping you'll accept what I'm trying to say to you. How important it is that you control your dog. Okay, how do we get that thing done? Anytime you are with your dog, know this. You're not an equal. You're not. Nature, contrary to what so many people think, does not like equality in her social settings. Instead, she prefers asymmetry. And with asymmetry, she used that to form two very distinct personalities. One of those with more ability, with the biology that gave them the capability of exerting their power and influence over the other members of the group more than some of the other members in the group. She made it very distinct. You will have the power to do so. Now, whether you like to do so or not, that's up to you. But I'm giving you the biology to exert your power and influence over the scrounger. The scrounger will not have the same ability as you. But if we remember from Dr. Stephen Spott in his book, The Societies of Wolves and Free-Ranging Dogs, remember, should that scrounger be given the opportunity, even though it does not have the biology, if it has any within the group that has lesser biology, then it will rise to act like a dominant animal. And so from two distinct personalities, she was able to then form hierarchies as a substitute for continual aggression among animals smart enough to know their place, which then led, again, as affirmed by Dr. Stephen Spott in his book, that leads to social stability. So please keep that in mind. If you wish to have social stability in your home versus chaos, you wish to be able to control your dog's life versus your dog controlling your life every time you turn around. If you want to be able to walk your dog and not dread it, you go out at midnight so that you don't meet anyone else with their dog. You don't ever have company over your house because you're afraid of how your dog will behave or you're embarrassed by it. If you want to control your dog, at some point you will have to understand that you are not an equal. Captain is my friend, but he is not my equal. When I tell him to come, he may be engaged in something that is so important to him that a friend, a best friend may say, well, go ahead and finish up. And when you're done, can you come over here, please? But see, that leads to a lot of problems. Because what if the thing he's interested in happens to be a dead animal in the middle of a highway? What if the thing he is interested in is chasing off the delivery guy? I have to be able to exert my power and influence over my dog to save him from himself. So again, keep that in mind. What is the next thing we must do? Anytime that you can mimic a wild society, what nature does, at least from a dog's view, you're going to be much better off. Because the learning from the dogs will be easier because it's from their point of view. Again, one of my other favorite authors is Dr. Richard Dawkins, because he taught us from a layman's point of view, from a layman's standpoint, how to see the world from a gene-eye view, all the way back to genetics. But if you mimic nature within reason, and you mimic what dominant animals do, you will be able to convince your dog you do have the power. And more importantly, the will and the ability to influence their behavior by whatever means. If you're this tall and your dog is that tall, you're weaker physically and they're stronger. Well, we have the advantage. We're humans. We have technology. We have equipment. We have things that can help equalize that power disparity. So it's not a matter of brawn, a matter of fighting skill. It's simply using or taking advantage of equipment that you can use to control your dog's behavior. But again, that's where we fall so short, because we don't have the will to convince our dogs that we do have the will, and we have the power, and we have the authority, and we have the capability to influence their behavior. And don't think for a second they don't know that. Again, you've seen my dog Captain many times. I wish you'd seen all of his predecessors before him. I wasn't doing videos back then, but I wish you'd seen them. It was amazing. Even to this day, I go, wow, God, we had that incredible relationship. I remember my police dog right there by my head every night in that patrol car, scanning the horizon. Right there. He was so tough. In 3 separate battles with human beings that were crazed out of their minds, he endured 4 broken bones and he stayed in the fight. He stayed in the fight. And he did everything I told him to do. We had an incredible relationship, but even him, as strong as he was, my attitude was, I love you, Yager. I do. You saved my life. But my will, mine, is law. which means if it ever comes to this, I win. I win. You may not understand that, you may not accept that, but that is the way it is. My will is law. And once you adopt that attitude, then you, through an instigative aggression, just your mere presence convinces the dog at any given moment that you do have that capability. And when you do that, you will avoid so many situations with your dog in which you may have to use means that you should not. Simply by a look, simply by your presence. And those of you who own dogs in the household, and you find that the dog responds better to one individual more so than the other, faster, more reliable, does for them but doesn't do for you. That's why I say we all get the dog we deserve. Yeah. Captain, by far, I am definitely harder on Captain. I demand more from Captain than my wife, Kara. But she'll tell you, when I leave, he lays by the back door waiting for me. For me. Again, animals tend to gravitate to the strongest influence in the room, just like people do. There's a difference between threatening and a difference between saying, if anything goes south in here, anything terrible starts to happen to our group, fall behind me. It's why when wolves travel in the wild, it's usually a family unit. Where do you find mom and dad? One of them, in very dense force, will be up front. It is not about leadership. It's about the fact that if I turn this corner and I encounter a raging grizzly bear with 2 cubs, at least I'm more equipped to deal with that than you are. You run, I got it. And so these animals gravitate around that individual. They do so. You provide social support. No different than if I'm walking a dog who's extremely fearful of other humans and other dogs. By my ability to say, sit and be quiet, I've just demonstrated through social referencing to this dog that I, at least out of the 2 of us, I have more ability to influence and exert my power over whatever's approaching us than you do. Stand down. I'll take it from here. But instead, I don't, or I won't, ever exert my power and influence over my dog. Now, I'm not confident. I'm worried. My hands are shaking. And so my fear goes down into the dog. And remember, the weak will lead the weaker. And so suddenly the dog looks up and says, no help here. I'm going to have to take this thing on by myself. And then, of course, we'll also learn that you can learn to use your power and influence other individuals. You can learn to do that. Why? From my previous personal history of winning and losing. So here they come. Rah, rah, rah. Boom, 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 boom. They're gone. That worked. I'll keep that in mind next time. And by the way, thank you very little for your help. So guys, mimic what wild societies do. In that wild society, there are members who portray constantly, not through actions, just their presence, that they have the ability and the willingness to exert their power and influence over another individual should they elect to do so. And so that brings me to my next point on this mimic to do it. Only exert your power and influence, of course, when you feel you need to. But by golly, don't suddenly feel like you need to and you've never done it before, because you're probably going to come up a little bit on the short side. Make sure, so once you establish my ethos, my power, you're now in my ecosystem. Know me. Know who I am. Know when I'm genuinely happy with your behavior and when I am not. Know my power. Don't test it. because I will only exert it and use it when I feel I need to. And that brings me to the very next point. Keep the context of your use of dominance in mind. And again, in wild societies, usually only two contexts. Number one, by far, competitive. Competitive. To always understand the context in which dominance finds itself. And if it happens to land in competitive, then you will have to make sure that after you've already done all of this, that you've trained commands like out, leave it, stop it, just no. Don't do that. And if you have something, you let go of it now. And if you're about to grab it, leave it. That's competitive. The combination of your power that you've already previously displayed, that you've convinced your animal that you have, coupled with training, now will save you and will also help deter any sort of physical skirmishes that should occur or any sort of combativeness. When suddenly you reach for it and your dog attacks you to drive you away, trying to use its power and influence to make you back off. I'm keeping this bone. This is my food. This is my spot on the bed. And you are not taking it from me. So again, make sure that you always keep in mind the context in which you are trying to exert your power and influence. The other one is non-competitive. Non-competitive. So that would be more akin to your regular obedience. Heel. I don't know. You can't pull me. You must come over here by me. Come to me when I call you. Lay down. Stay. Place. Be quiet. Don't jump on anyone. Yeah, stay in the yard. Things like that. That's non-competitive. And make sure, because again, when I'm doing obedience versus now being growled at by a dog, because it has something that I feel is dangerous in its mouth, I'm under two different mindsets by far. Obedience, I got this thing going on over here. I'm kind of, my arousal column's down. I'm under control. I'm thinking, what's the next step? What has the dog learned previously? What do we do now? I slow things down. But when you're suddenly faced with an animal that has your bottle of Ambien in its mouth, there's some rapid fire decision making, but you are up that stress response column. You are. So make sure you think about always ahead of time in preparation. You know, what's the old saying goes, if you expect the worst, then you'll be prepared for the worst. You know, or I think there's a saying in which the worst only happens when you least expect it. Well, perhaps you should expect it, because then at least you'll be prepared. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, one of the biggest misconceptions is that there's some sort of leadership here. If this isn't so much leading the dog as it is controlling the dog. I will get into that later, the difference between really dominance and leadership. Leadership, in simplest terms, is a byproduct of dominance. Again, the weaker tend to gravitate around the stronger in times in which they feel threatened by anything outside of the stronger. When the stronger approaches them, they tend to avoid it. They go, he's the one that did that, not me. They avoid it. But whenever there's an outside force that threatens the whole group, now you'll find where every single one of them are. Gravitating around the strong. So those of you with fearful and anxious dogs, your presence, simply by merely making that dog who's anxious and fearful, even the ones that are maladaptive, the ones that I have to treat with psychopharmaceutical medications, one of the first things I work on in the therapy portion is with the dog's owner. Building confidence, building power in them. so they can influence their dog's behavior. And by that, their dogs do start to follow their instruction. And if you want to split hairs and call that leadership, then it is what it is. But some people have an aversion to being led. They have some childhood issue. They had some military issue. They had some corporate issue with a bad boss, whatever. So if you need to just write that word out of your head, just erase it right now. Okay, I'll stand over so you can't even see it. To just think about, hey, I'm simply trying to control my dog. And if I control my dog, and my dog understands that I can control it, then guess what? Based upon its previous history of losing in certain situations, well, unlike humans, dogs don't have a tendency to keep repeating those situations. They don't keep trying to win over and over again. We're the only species on the planet that can afford to do that, so we do that. They don't. That's all I have to do. Okay, guys, I hope this helped you. And this kind of wraps up my little series on dominance. Again, overall, it is needed. Like Cormac McCarthy said in his book, it was there waiting on us, humans and dogs. It's been there. It's a war of sorts. It really is. There's always something that you have that they want and something they have that you want. There's always an individual goal that just may not align with your individual goal at that moment. It's part of life. Accept it for what it is, embrace it, and decide what part do you want to play in it. Do you want to be the controller? Or do you want to be the one that's being controlled? That's your decision to make. But please, make the decision where you're the controller. Because otherwise, your dog will control you. It'll find every means it can to control you. And when you finally said, Uncle, and trust me, even the most fierce creatures on this planet, when they've had enough pain, my dog is driving me crazy, I can't live with this anymore, they'll say, Uncle. So for your dog's sake, rise up. Come on, get those shoulders back. Say, I love you, dog. But my will is law. So there can never be any question as to the outcome of any command I give you. I will always be in a position to ensure that if I say come, you'll go from point A to point B. When I say down, you'll lay down. I will always do that. In my next video, I'm going to talk about what happens when you do that. How you form habits, neural pathways that are so deep and so wide that your dog is doomed to be obedient, or at least respond to that particular command in a particular way for the rest of its life. Again, you've seen Captain. He's been in over 400 videos. Dude's naked. He's naked because he can't screw up. It's impossible. So stay tuned for that. So the rest of your day, I want you to do me a favor. Get yourself a little notepad. And you be honest with yourself. And you write down when you felt someone exerted their power and influence over you. And then, even more importantly, when you felt that you exerted your power and influence over others. And you will find that that scale can go from playfulness to seriousness, just like I wrote yesterday. It's a continuum, back and forth. And I guarantee you'll be absolutely surprised as to how many times you were literally dominated in your day. And in turn, how many times you dominated someone else. Hey, when you get those, send them to me. Drop them down in the thread. Let's continue with this conversation. Because you know I love you, and I only want the best for you and your dog. So that's it. I'm done. I'm done exerting my power and influence over a machine. I'd rather be done it in person. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe.